Hello and welcome to Media MD, the podcast where each fortnight we prescribe each other a piece of media that the other person has somehow missed. Elliot, I'm just realizing that we're going to have to update that intro. So, what are we recommending this fortnight, Elliot?
Everything that we've
Wrong.
looked at so far.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit, but we should talk about first. Congratulations, Elliot, on our 1 year podiversary. This is episode 26, which will go up in a few days on the 1 year anniversary since we started this podcast. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we've started building up a listener base that I'm pretty sure is not just bots. We had some people follow us on Twitter, so that was pretty good. So we're getting there. We're basically famous. And we've been kind of talking behind the scenes about how the show has been running and how we want it to run. When we started the show, our goal was to kind of talk about stuff that we hadn't seen and bring stuff that each of us who watch a lot of media haven't seen to each other, right?
Yeah.
But as we've been doing that, we've realized that's a pretty good format, but we want to try and kind of turn it into a bit more of a book club podcast, except with not just books, with TV and movies and, whatever media that we normally would cover, right?
More of a community thing rather than just the two of us sort of going at it.
We want to talk about on the show because we're going to try and, over the next year, I guess, or life of this podcast, we're going to try and double down on that stuff. So we're going to be adjusting the kind of release format of the podcast a bit. So whereas before it was every 2 weeks you get one big chunk of episode, which is partly recorded 2 weeks earlier and then partly recorded a few days before the episode goes out, we're going to be mixing it up a bit. We're going to have a kind of 3-week cycle of content, right?
Yeah.
This episode is a little different, and we'll get into that a bit later. But starting from next week, we're going to be doing the part 1, what you would normally hear as the part 1 before the kind of ad break, will be its own episode. Then a week after that, you'll be getting a kind of off-week episode where we talk about media that's a little bit outside of the kind of bounds of the regular show. And then the week after that, you'll be getting the part 2. So we'll actually be kind of bringing you guys, the audience, as well as each other, the piece of media that we want to talk about, giving you 2 weeks to check up on it and kind of engage with us on the subreddit, write your comments, talk about that stuff. Then 2 weeks later, we'll come back and we'll talk about it. And we will be kind of looking at your feedback and talking about how the community felt about the thing that we were talking about that fortnight. So it'll be kind of more like a monthly-ish media club.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we've been doing anyway, but a little bit more structured, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So people will be able to participate in that 2 week gap, like you're talking about, where you can watch it, and if it's something you've already seen or read, find a friend and get them to do it, and you can tell us about their experience as well. Get them to listen, and then we'll have lots of listeners and more feedback.
Yeah, something we tried to do is this show is always kind of the person who knows what they're talking about versus, or not versus, it's not a competition, but and the person who is new to the thing. So, for example, with something like Worm, where there was a big kind of community, we tried to angle this episode as this is what you would get people to listen to if you want to get them into Worm without telling them too much about Worm and spoiling it, which is why we always keep the part 1 spoiler free, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to try and kind of embrace that a bit more with the community. So if if we're doing an episode on something that you like and you want to try and get people into it, you can recommend them the part 1 of that kind of group of episodes, and they can come along and check it out, and maybe it will kind of pique their curiosity and they'll follow along with it with the show. So we want to kind of get that as well going. Is there anything else about the format we should talk about before we actually get stuck into this special episode, Elliot?
No, I think that's everything, but if it's not, we'll just add it in later. Editing.
Yep, we'll post it in right here. Anyway, let's talk about what this episode is going to be. So, as we mentioned, it's our 1 year podcast anniversary. So we thought we'd do something a little bit different, and we're going to try and start this as a kind of annual tradition, our annual checkups.
So that's something we should talk about. Next year, we'd like to actually commit to this medical theme. Yeah.
So, Elliot, you're getting a doctorate in medicine, and we're going to actually become media doctors. It just occurred to me, Elliot, we need to do something with this. It just occurred to me that the word medical is so close to the word media. It's like 2 letters off.
Wow, this is about a year too late.
I know, we could have figured something out with this. Anyway, Yeah, so this episode is our annual checkup. We're going to be going back over some of the things from the past year, all the episodes that we did, well, not all of them, but the interesting ones, the ones that have follow-ups. So maybe maybe we didn't get to talk about all of the media from in the past episode if it was something really long, like Worm, or maybe it was something like Sense8, where another season came out and we can talk about that. We're going to be kind of following up on our stuff from the past year.
New listeners, it's probably a good place to jump in and see what we've talked about, and maybe there you'll find one or two that interest you and you can go back and listen to those.
Yep, and if you're thinking, oh god, I don't want to have to sit through 20 more minutes of them talking about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, great news. I'm going to be putting the times for when we start talking about each thing in the show notes. So if you have an episode that was on something you really hated or whatever, and you want to skip past it, that should let you know exactly how long to ride that 15 seconds skip forward button. Yeah, so let's get stuck into it. Before we actually talk about Seven Ancient Wonders, which was our first episode, we're going to talk about the awards for who did the best this year.
Let's get into some statistics.
It's the most exciting thing.
I know. So I've gone through and listened to the score parts of every other episode to sort of tally it all up. So I just want to start by getting you, Reuben, to guess who had the highest average score.
Now, here's what I'm going to guess. I think you had the highest average score, but I think I had more varying scores. So I reckon you hated... I'm looking at our episode list here, and of all the episodes we did, I think you hated Over the Garden Wall the most, and you also liked Worm the most. I think those are our highest and lowest scores that we gave out.
Okay. Well, you are in fact wrong, because the winner is actually Victor Rubio, who got an average score of 9.
Okay, come on. That doesn't count. Victor, congratulations, but that doesn't count.
No, so actually it was pretty close. So you actually had a higher average score with your recommendations of 7.5, whereas I had 7.3.
We might not be very good at this. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, and this again, the variances were both about 1.4.
Okay.
So we're actually
getting too heavy into the stats. What was the shittest thing that we talked about on the show? Let me hear that.
So yeah, the lowest score overall was my recommendation of Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, with a score of 4.
I gave that a score of 4?
Yeah.
That feels so harsh in hindsight. I didn't hate it that much.
Meanwhile, yeah, Over the Garden Wall was the lowest score of something you recommended with 4.5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then so we actually tied for the highest with Westworld and Worm. So the letter W is a safe bet in this podcast. That's my takeaway there.
All right, cool. So I won.
Yeah.
All right, you're fired, Elliot. This is going to be a solo podcast now.
I went through and sort of, double checked, and, really Westworld is probably the most contentious one because I kind of forced you to do it for the podcast anyways, and that's my best score.
That's
so if
true.
we take that one out, I'm even worse off.
What was your next highest?
Todd Sampson's BodyHack, 8.5.
Okay, yeah. So if you're looking for something to watch that you haven't seen before, Westworld, or you could read Worm. Those are both pretty safe bets. Also, Todd Sampson's BodyHack, but that's not available outside of Australia. So. Sorry, guys.
It might be by now. It might have.
Maybe.
It might have.
We probably should have researched that for this thing. Anyway, let's dive into talking about some of our kind of previous media. And we'll jump in with our first episode, which is about Seven Ancient Wonders, the book series by Matthew Riley.
Yeah. So I mean, how's that sitting with you almost a year later? Do you remember any of it?
It's in my year retrospective of. I do remember that part where he stuck his hand into the lava, and then he got a robotic arm. And I remember, I think I was actually talking to someone about this, and I was surprised at how little I remembered of the plot. It might have been you, Elliot.
It's because, let's face it, these Matthew Riley books, the plot isn't really important.
Well,
or good.
Sorry, Matthew Riley. We love you.
In October last year, he actually released another one in that series of Seven Ancient Wonders. So he did Four Legendary Kingdoms, which is the 4th book he's counting down. Yeah. And I mean, I'm actually only about halfway through it, because it's just sort of when there's not something serious to read, it's a good fallback.
It's your backup when you don't have anything you actually want to read or watch.
And it's funny, I had that same experience. I sat down, and it's been a few years since I read the first three, and I had absolutely no memory of where anybody was up to or what had happened. But I was amazed at how quickly I was able to catch up on what I needed to at the same time. It turns out that there wasn't really a whole lot to get my head around again. But yeah, I mean, this book is just more of the same. The only thing of note for this one, and this will probably mean nothing to just about anyone, but his character Scarecrow from his other big series, the Scarecrow books, has shown up. So it's like a crossover with his own other book series.
I'm remembering a conversation we had about this exact thing, and I don't think it's a good sign that even that conversation has completely slipped out of my memory. Maybe I'll have to get back to 6 deadly viruses or whatever it's called at some point and kind of continue the series.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the same. So, like, all of his books feel very similar. So if you just feel yourself wanting to experience that again, then go for it. Like, and I mean, obviously I do, because I'm now reading what must be about my 10th Matthew Riley book.
You poor man. All right, let's move on to number 2, which is Sense8. So Sense8, I'm just going to put this out there, Elliot. I know I was going to watch season 2 of Sense8, but I kind of haven't gotten around to it yet. I've been watching a lot of TV in preparation for this very episode.
Yeah.
And there's just been too much.
Fair enough. Well,
so I'm like up to episode 4 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say here because as you know, I was watching season 2, and as I was about halfway through, you felt that it was a good time to send me the news that it had been cancelled.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Maybe I could have waited until you had finished it. Just to really have that gut punch going.
Yeah, so, and that was a shame because I actually thought season 2 of Sense8 was probably some of the best TV I've ever seen. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a show deliver on the promise of season 1 as much as Sense8. Like, it... At the same time, every individual character's stories got way more compelling, and also the overall story was much more compelling. All of the complaints we had about how they just sort of did their own thing and were occasionally visited by each other went away. Like, they were actually constantly doing things together and as a team.
Yeah. Well, it felt like season 1 was their origin story, and now that that's kind of out of the way, they're able to just be like, oh, hey, I would want the actor dude to come in and help me with this thing right now.
Yeah, it was a lot more it was a lot more realistic. Like, that was what you would be doing if you were in this situation, is like getting the benefits of being in a cluster. And that was one of my big complaints about season 1, and that sort of went away. And so I was pretty devastated to see Netflix cancel it, although after seeing that, I then found out that the budget was like more than $10 million an episode or something, which...
Jesus Christ.
Which, I mean, as much as I enjoyed it, I'm not quite sure where all of that money was going to. Like...
Into the lube for all their fucking huge orgies that they have every episode.
So I think that was possibly the thing that hurt me the most about it, is that I was so devastated that it was cancelled, but at the same time, for that amount of money, I can't help but think Netflix probably made the right call.
Well, and then I'm looking at our show notes for this episode, and the note you wrote here was, fuck you, Netflix. And then they did announce just like a few days, what was it, like a week ago or something, that they are going to do a kind of 2-hour wrap-up finale thing. So you had to amend your note to say, fuck you, Netflix, bracket, mostly. Yeah. Which is a nice little add in there. Yeah, so I assume you were going to come into this episode with a lot of rage, and then they kind of undercut you.
Yeah, they took my whole shtick. No, I mean, I think this is good because, I mean, given the whole money aspect of it, a 2-hour finale is really all we can expect, and that's good. It's going to be a bit like Serenity from Firefly, but, it's going to be rushed, but it's definitely better than nothing because, I mean, you're not up to it yet, but I'd say the season ends on not necessarily a cliffhanger, but it ends with the start of a new chapter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they set up what season 3 was going to be, as it closes.
Oh, that's rough.
And then it was just going to end, and that was supremely disappointing. So 2 hours,
Well,
2 hours is going to be
speaking of a show
cramped,
just ending, the next one in our list, the next show that we talked about is Firefly, right?
Yeah, so just like Serenity's getting its own, sorry, Sense8's getting its own Serenity.
Yep.
Firefly had that too.
Yep, and that's all we have to say about it. Let's move on. Number
there's
4 is
not much-
Reservoir
there's-
Dogs.
There's not much new news in the Firefly department, considering it was cancelled.
No, it's
15
back,
years ago.
Elliot. They're bringing it back. I actually think I did read a news story about like a new thing set in the Firefly universe, but I don't think it's like gotten to any kind of confirmation yet.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. There's always like new, like they did like a mobile game where you got to captain your own ship in the Firefly universe and stuff like that. People are still sort of outputting, and there's the comic series that, as far as I know, is sort of still ongoing. But yeah, so like Firefly's popular enough that there's always something coming.
Well, I'm impressed with us, Elliot. We actually talked about Firefly more than I thought we would. So Reservoir Dogs, you got anything for this one?
No. I was going
Alright.
to try and see Quentin Tarantino's new movie to talk about that too, but then I didn't because the Armadale
The sequel,
Cinema didn't get
Reservoir
it.
Cats.
So
That was a
next
pretty
up
good
is
joke. Thank you. Let's move on. Stargate. So, well, why don't you introduce this one, Elliot?
Yeah, well, so I guess part of, like, obviously, I think you talked about watching more after the episode, but that sort of didn't really happen. And so one of the things...
I watched up to, like, season 5.5, man. I did pretty good.
4.5, but yeah, okay.
4.5. Still counts.
Yeah, no, you did a bit more, but then it sort of died off. And I guess something that I sort of was thinking about is I ended up going back myself and just sort of watching Stargate Atlantis, the spin-off. And it starts a lot stronger because it came out during season 8 of SG1, and it sort of had already learnt all those lessons. And in retrospect, I was thinking I probably should have just recommended you Atlantis. If I want to get someone hooked on Stargate, I'm probably better off, even though, you know, there's some spoilers and stuff for SG1 and it's not the true continuity experience. It's probably a better way to get people actually into it because I'd say it's leagues ahead of especially season 1 of SG1.
Yeah, and so I started watching Atlantis.
So I asked you to watch as much of season 1 of Atlantis as you could just to, I guess, see if that hypothesis is correct.
And when I said that I didn't have a lot of time to watch Sense8 because of other TV shows, this is what I was talking about. So I finished season 1 of Atlantis. And yeah, I kind of agree with you that I think Atlantis would have been a better jumping on point. In fact, I watched it with my girlfriend who hadn't watched SG1 or any Stargate stuff before, and she was really into it. And I don't know if she would have been that into it if we had started with SG1 season 1.
Yeah.
They are basically, from what I can tell, just kind of the same show. Even to the point where, like, the characters have very clear parallels to just, like, recast their character and kind of given them a different name. It's very... I don't know.
Yeah, Atlantis didn't try very hard to be different.
Yeah.
It very much... It was like, oh, we can just take the good SG1 formula that we've worked out over the last 8 seasons and sort of apply it in a fresh place. And that was really all they did.
Yeah, they really didn't try and like do anything really new, although it was good. I mean, it kind of had this thing where I watched the whole season, including the Faith fucking brought back the thing from SG1 where the season ends on part 2 of a fucking 3-part episode, which is so frustrating. And the worst part is those are the worst. Like, those are by far the worst episodes in the season, are like the weird 3-part finale, because they just have to stretch it out into a 3-parter, and it's just so, I don't know. But my example of what kind of Stargate learned from SG1 is SG1 really felt like the team was really on the back foot a lot, like tech-wise, and Atlantis kind of has this 3-parter that ends with, or that kind of the plot is they're being attacked by this race of aliens. It's like the exact same plot from SG1 season 1 finale. But they have this kind of clock of a giant starship from Stargate Command in SG-1 is literally flying through the galaxy to them to like save them, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's this really cool thing of like they actually have access to tech that is useful. They're not always coming from a place of we're on Earth, we don't have any tech, we need something. They're coming from a place of we're on this place where we have access to some good tech and we can kind of sometimes be on the front foot about these things and not just always be working from the kind of low ground, which I think really adds to the dynamic in a cool way.
Yeah, but at the same time, the cool thing about what sort of happens to Earth's tech as both the series goes on is Earth has managed to sort of fluke its way into all these powerful ships and like the power of the tech of Atlantis, but they don't fully understand it, so it gives the writers a lot of freedom to be like, they can do this, but they can't do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because they have the technology, but they didn't make it themselves, so they don't fully understand it, so sometimes they can't get it to do what they want and that sort of thing.
And they have this thing where the series is set in Atlantis, which is this like huge city. Yeah. And it's such a big city that they haven't had the time yet to explore all of it. And so sometimes they'll just have an episode where or at least in season 1, where they just find a new part of Atlantis that they hadn't explored and there's like some really cool thing there. And it's kind of this weird thing where like, it seems like they're just using it as a plot device to introduce new things without having to go through the Stargate. And I'm hoping eventually they'll run out of unexplored areas of Atlantis, but I can kind of see them just constantly finding more bits.
No, they're still doing that in season 5.
Yeah, okay, of course.
And I know I quite like those because it's sort of the Atlantis equivalent of SG-1 used to have episodes that were set entirely on Earth.
Yeah.
And I see these as the sort of Atlantis equivalent where it's just, them sort of having to struggle with something locally which sort of catches them all off guard and that sort of thing. Like, it's sort of attacking their home or whatever.
Yeah.
I quite
or
like
just
them.
some interesting piece of tech or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, like with SG-1, the episodes that I liked more are not the ones where they have some weird imminent alien threat. They're the ones where they're like having some weird kind of political or technological kind of thing happen. So there's episodes where they'll go to a planet and they're trying to like build a vaccine or they're trying to like do whatever. And those are always the most interesting ones to me because they have kind of interesting... the reason I love sci-fi is because it can lead to these situations and kind of moral questions and ethical questions that you wouldn't get in just regular kind of stories a lot of the time.
Or that they can use the absurd sort of situations and the very different situations to bring up a very sort of human problem, if that makes sense. Like using
exactly.
Using aliens to bring up racism or that sort of thing is like
and that's what sci-fi is really good at, right? Yeah. But I do have to say my one criticism of Atlantis so far is that the Wraith, who are the main alien villains in Atlantis, who are basically just space vampires, they're so uninteresting compared to the Goa'uld from SG-1. Because the Wraith are just like, vampires, we're going to hunt you down, we're going to kill you, we have advanced tech, that's us. Yeah, whereas the Goa'uld are like, hey, we like infest people's bodies and we have all these cool like rituals and like people think of us as gods and like there's all this really cool stuff happening. Whereas with the Wraith, it's just like, hey, we're going to come kill you, that's it.
So I would sort of change that criticism to say that what the problem is that the Wraith take like 2.5 seasons to become 3-dimensional. Oh really? Atlantis sort of does this very weird thing where it's hard to tell if it was like plot holes that they're filling in or whether it's like some genius long-term strategy. But a lot of things don't often make sense until a few seasons after they're introduced. So, for instance, I think you would have seen the season 1 episode.
Genius strategy for sure.
There's a season 1 episode where they get a few of them get infected by these nanites from a flooded part of the city. So I think it's like towards the end of season 3 that they actually figure out like where those came from. And there's a lot of things like a lot of the Wraith so basically sort of a bit of a spoiler for later on.
Spoiler alert.
Eventually, one of the big things that happens to the Wraith when they don't manage to take Atlantis is that they've woken up too early. So there aren't enough worlds for them to cull. So then there becomes this sort of Wraith civil war. And that leads to the Wraith becoming a lot less 2-dimensional because then some of them have to start working with various humans to get their hive ship
That's
an
cool.
advantage.
See, that's so cool.
Yeah, and it becomes a lot more interesting, and then they become like actual Wraith characters who are sort of like some of the gold, like they'll constantly meet up and have to work with them, but it always ends
Like
badly.
the friendly gold. Who are the friendly gold?
The Tok'ra.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
It's so science fiction.
The Wraiths do become a lot more interesting. It's just a shame, but yeah, you're right. It does take
that
a
it
long
takes
time.
a long time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely say if you were gonna try and get into something Stargate, I would start with Atlantis, just because.
Yeah.
I don't know. SG1's good, but it has that build up, whereas Atlantis they jump in already kind of knowing what they're doing to an extent.
Yeah, Atlantis sort of really starts at about the peak of SG1, and yeah, you don't have to trudge through a couple of seasons of garbage. The only other Stargate thing is as it seems that Roland Emmerich's reboot of the movies has been cancelled. So that's very exciting to fans of the TV show.
Our petition worked. It was just your signature and mine, Elliot, but it worked.
Yeah, so congratulations to our very powerful listener base for helping us make that a reality.
All right. Speaking of things that we made a reality as well, we'll use that as our segue into episode 6, Young Justice, which has announced that it's coming back. It's got a season 3 on the way. Is it Netflix made? Is that right?
They haven't confirmed, I don't think. Everyone's just sort of assuming that it is, but
because that was the rumor. I think we even discussed it on the episode.
Yeah.
But no one really thought it was going to happen, and now it's happening. So that's cool.
No, but I think it was just like Warner Brothers announced that they were doing it, but they haven't like announced who they're doing it with. Yeah. They've just announced they've got the like original writers and the original cast back, which is pretty exciting. So
yeah.
And this time I'm actually banking on a time skip. I think this would be an appropriate use of the time skip.
Yeah, well, they left some dangling plot threads, so we'll have to see if they kind of come back to them or if they want to kind of soft reboot it or whatever. Yeah, so our next, 6 episodes, we don't really have a lot to talk about for them, I don't think. So that's Over the Garden Wall, Frankenstein, Salem's Lot, Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, which I think they're doing. I think I saw a trailer for a new one of those, but
they are.
We don't need to talk about it. Yeah, the Boondocks and Robbie the Reindeer, and I don't think we have anything for these ones, right?
No, I can't think of anything. I mean, I think we talked about everything we need to talk about in the episodes.
All right, so if you're interested in any of those episodes, go back and listen to the actual episode.
Yeah.
Next up, the big one, number 13, Worm. So, on our actual Worm episode, you got up to arc 13 or 14? Is that right?
Yeah, I did a pretty good job, really. In about 2 weeks, I got through just under half the story, and
That's
it took
impressive.
took me about another 6 months to actually finish it off.
Finally did it.
Yeah, it was a long but fulfilling journey, I would say. And I had been doing a thing. I'd actually been intentionally working through it slowly, trying not to overdo too much each day. And I think I got about, I want to say about 20 chapters away from the end, and then just accidentally ended up reading them all in one day and got nothing done.
That happens sometimes with Worm, you know?
So, yeah, I mean, I can't recommend Worm enough to people.
Well, you gave it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, well, that was...
You maintaining that?
I'd up it to a 9.5. There are some issues.
That means I definitively win.
Yeah, definitely. Worm was, I think I said this in the episode. It's exactly sort of what I was hoping to get out of this podcast, because Worm's something I absolutely never would have read without having been forced to.
Yeah. I do think Worm is something that is, I mean, there's this arc in Worm, which I mentioned in the episode, I think, which is it's called the Slaughterhouse 9000 arc. It's about chapters or arcs 23 to 26, I think it is. And that's probably the one part which I would say doesn't hold up from a consistency point, and then it kind of jumps into the end of Worm, which is fucking balls to the wall. Lovely.
And I mean, because Worm still exists essentially in its draft form. I mean, Wildbow's been talking about fixing it up and publishing it since it finished. And he hasn't managed to do it yet because he's too busy writing new things. But like, I mean, a lot of people criticize, that section of Worm that you were talking about, particularly because it has that like, spoiler alert, time skip. That a lot of people, honestly, I didn't think it was executed that well. But in saying that, I was very glad when it happened, because it had felt to me like the story had been dragging out to that point. Because I think, like, Wildbow knew where he wanted everyone to be in a year and a half, and he was trying to figure out how to get there without time skipping. And eventually, he just sort of gave up halfway through one of the chapters.
Let's do it.
And I think that's probably due to that crazy publishing schedule that he works off, where he has to publish two chapters a week.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you haven't read A Song of Ice and Fire, like the Game of Thrones books.
Yeah.
But they're actually a testament to what happens when someone isn't on that sort of writing schedule, because those books were also meant to have a time skip of about a year and a half or 3 years or something. And George R. R. Martin decided he didn't want to do that, and now the book series has been delayed about 20 years. It's gone from a trilogy to 7 books, and it's kind of a mess in the middle.
And even more than that, it's this thing of, like, and I don't want to turn into two white nerds talking on a podcast, but it's like it's this total Half-Life 3 thing, where if you have too much of a time between your media and it's media that people respect, the hype is just going to build up, and it's never going to live up to expectations. So you need to have some kind of consistency on your releases. Like, another thing that I would probably point to is the King Killer. Is that what they're called? The King Killer Chronicle books?
Yeah.
Which are these fantasy books, and I think there's 2 out of the trilogy, and it's been like, what has it been, like 8 years or something since the second book came out? Is that right? Something like that. It's been some huge amount of time, and these are great books, but you kind of get this hype fatigue, and you build up wanting to read these books, and then it's like, it just feels like it's never going to be able to live up to its expectations, you know?
Yeah, well, because as people wait longer and longer for something, their expectation in how much it's going to, how enjoyable it's going to be, just, like, sort of goes up.
Yeah.
And
which is why I'm worried about Worm 2, and let's use that as our awkward segue.
Well, Worm 2 is meant to start very soon, right? Like, his current story
very soon is
sort of
kind of Valve time, where we don't.
Let's
talk about Wildbow's other work. So he did Worm, and then he went into Pact, which is, I read and I loved it. I actually think I loved it more than Worm, which is very unpopular in the kind of Worm community. It's probably the least liked of the 3, but I really fucking loved it. And then he went into Twig, which I started reading, and I didn't really like it. And Twig is still going. Twig is apparently almost finished. I don't really read it, so I can't really judge how close to the end it is. But Wildbow has said as soon as he finishes Twig, he's going to launch right into Worm 2 on his regular schedule. I'm excited to be reading it as it comes out, and to be able to kind of engage in the fan theories and the speculation. Do you feel like you're going to do that?
I don't know. I've had other things ruined by engaging too much in fan theories, so I don't know how deep I want to dive into that. But I'm definitely gonna enjoy being a part of the community and reading it week by week, because obviously I was reading Worm about 4 years after it finished, and mostly I was just bombarding you with crackpot theories and opinions. So it'll be interesting to sort of see the community as it evolves, but I don't know if I want to participate too much in theorizing, because usually that either leads to great theories that when they aren't true feels like they would have been better, or they, the community, if you throw enough darts, eventually one of them will hit the bullseye, and somebody guesses it.
The thing is, I would say that with most pieces of media, but Wildbow as an author is one who I definitely trust to kind of pull out the good stuff on that kind of regard. I feel like he's so meticulous about planning out his stories that he's not even gonna start a story without knowing the good kind of points along the way.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything else to say about Worm 2?
No, I'm just waiting for it, and
just want it. Give it to us, Jason McRae. We want it.
I mean, I'm just like every time a new Twig chapter comes out, I'm heading straight to the comments to see if people are talking about whether or not
it's over.
The
it's over. and then all the characters died, and then you're like, yes, next week it's happening. So let's talk about episode 14, Todd Sampson's BodyHack. And sorry again, Australians. Sorry, non-Australians.
Non-Australians, yeah.
I actually wanted to bring something up for this one because BodyHack is this kind of like personality exploring science type of show that I really enjoyed. It's kind of a, I guess the genre is probably pioneered by like Mythbusters or something like that.
I think that's a fair comparison.
And since we did the episode on BodyHack, a new show that was kind of like this that I really liked has come out called Mindfield. It's a show done by this guy, Michael, who runs a YouTube channel called Vsauce that you've probably seen if you're interested in like science stuff and you have been on YouTube before. He does a bunch of science videos, and he does a show called Mindfield with YouTube Red, which is YouTube's kind of streaming service, that is very much like BodyHack, except better, I would say. BodyHack had a lot of... I loved it. Obviously, it was like the third highest rated thing on that we've done on Media MD. It was great, but it definitely had a lot of points where it felt like it was let down by its production.
Yeah.
Or by like its being on network television. And Mindfield was basically like it, except didn't have that stuff. So I'd recommend to you, Elliot, getting it.
Yeah.
Which you will need to use up your 1 month free trial of YouTube Red for, but I'm sure you'll get through all 6 episodes in a month. But yeah, it was great. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah. Something I would not recommend is Todd Sampson actually had
These segues, man.
Todd Sampson's new show that he released shortly after we did our BodyHack episode, and I think we both sat down and watched the pilot on live TV, and it was not good.
You were watching it, and then you messaged me and said, go to ABC right now, and I turned it on halfway through the episode, and I was so glad that I didn't see your message until halfway through the episode. It was all the worst parts about BodyHack.
BodyHack, yeah, it was. I tried to sit down and watch a few others, and I think the problem was, the premise of the new show was that he was sort of trying to teach people science by putting his life on the line. So in the first one, he was like going on a little roller coaster thing through fire to prove, while he was wet, to prove that water protects you from fire or something. It was very unclear.
I've played Pokemon, Todd. I know that.
But the biggest issue is it was a half an hour show for this one little experiment, and it was like it just was so dragged out. It was like if you can imagine a Mythbusters episode where they were busting one myth an episode, that was essentially what.
Not even that. You know those Mythbusters episodes where they like take a group of myths and do like 6 or 7 rapid fire in an episode?
Yeah.
Imagine a myth that's kind of that small in scope, and they only do one of it in an episode. It would be that. It was so good.
It was drawn out and painful.
Yeah, you know that classroom experiment that they do where you like hold back, you like tie something to a piece of string and pull it back like a bowling ball or whatever. You pull it back and it like swings back up to the kid's face and it doesn't hit them because of I don't know, conservation of momentum or whatever.
Yeah, that
one
was
of the episodes is like that, but with a wrecking ball, right? And it's just like, Todd, man, you can't turn this into a half-hour show. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that was. It was very disappointing after liking all of his other shows so much to see one that just exacerbated all the worst parts of his previous shows.
Very frustrating. Well, now I'm in a bad mood to talk about this next one, which is a bummer because this was the episode of one of my favorite movies, Coherence, and already I'm cheering up because I love that movie. So on the Coherence episode, you mentioned a movie called Triangle, which you said was kind of similar to Coherence, or you felt it was similar.
Yeah, I felt similar after watching them both. If that makes sense. Like, I guess not that they're thematically that similar. I just the effect they had on me was similar, I guess.
Well, they're both movies. They're both in this category of like sci-fi kind of, or not sci-fi, but like mind-fucky kind of movies, right?
Yeah.
And so I watched Triangle like 2 months ago, and I definitely kind of see why you felt they were similar. Although I have to say, Triangle, I did like it, but it felt like it didn't kind of hold up its logic as consistently as Coherence did.
No, I definitely agree. I don't think Triangle is as good as Coherence, but I guess I just thought it was a similar experience.
Yeah, and I definitely did enjoy it quite a lot. It was a good movie, and I definitely recommend if you like watched Coherence from our episode and wanted to find something else, I would back Elliot's recommendation to watch Triangle. It was a pretty good movie. Except the main character. Well, I won't say that. That's a spoiler. Sorry. All right. So, episode 16, Westworld. I mean, season 2 is still coming at some point.
Yeah, I think maybe early next year.
Yep.
Yeah, so, not much else to say there
stay tuned.
That was good. Watch that. It's going to be HBO's new big show once Game of Thrones hurries up and finishes.
Yep. Next up, episode 17 was Father Ted. Now, do we have anything to say about this one?
Well, I mean, that was our first guest episode, I guess, so that's just sort of worth mentioning, thanks to James for diving in. And I mean, especially because, I mean, I enjoyed Father Ted, but I think part of it was lost on us being not Irish.
Yeah, I do feel that as well.
So,
although I think that kind of mostly affected the start of the show, because I remember not liking the first 2 episodes as much.
Yeah.
And then once I kind of got into the swing of it, I got into it, right? And it started working pretty well. So I don't know. I mean, if you're thinking, should I watch it or not? I definitely tell you to check it out.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth checking out. Just be aware that you might not get so into it. I don't know.
I mean, personally, I would sort of still say, on reflection, things like the later shows, like the IT Crowd and stuff, I probably enjoyed more.
Well, yeah, I definitely enjoyed the IT Crowd more. I think that's just because it is more accessible. Like, the comedy style is more accessible.
Yeah, it is. It was less. Yeah, that Father Ted definitely. Even I'd still find them enjoyable stuff, but a lot of the jokes would be definitely aimed at the sort of Irish culture. And you probably appreciate that more if you're from there.
Yeah. So, next up is episode 18, The Adventure Zone. So this is still going. It's actually almost nearing the end of their first campaign of the plot of The Adventure Zone. And they're continuing with a separate plot, like a kind of rebooted plot with different characters and a different universe afterwards. But yeah, it's finally, after 4 years, it's coming to an end, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, and I mean, so I've caught up and I've been listening to that each fortnight as it's been coming out. And I think because we've actually had conversations about this, I think there's very different parts of the show that appeal to us in some ways, because I've been complaining a lot about the most recent stuff, whereas I think you've been thoroughly enjoying
I've been into it. Yeah.
So, because I think, because we talked about this in the episode, actually. You sort of mentioned that the plot becomes a lot more compelling, and I was saying I wasn't feeling it where I was up to at the end of the 2 weeks. And now that I've all sort of caught up, I can sort of say that I'm still not feeling it. And
really?
It's been a point of contention, I think, between the two of us, because you are very much invested in it.
I am definitely heavily invested in the kind of overarching plot of The Adventure Zone. Let me ask you a question. And people, if you haven't listened to The Adventure Zone yet, go and listen to it. You're not going to get anything out of this if you haven't listened to it. Go listen to it. There's that episode in the 3 or 4 episodes back where Merle is able to do their one-on-one chats with John Hunger, whatever his name is. Yeah. What was your read on that?
I mean, it was all right. I don't know. I don't hate.
It was great.
I don't hate any of it, but
can't believe it.
I mean, I personally, I much enjoy the lower stake stuff. I guess an analogy I would make is going back to shows like Stargate and stuff that we're talking about. Stargate has those big epic finales where they're fighting the big wraith, and then there's those just episode of the week things where they find a rando planet.
Yeah.
And there's something weird going on. In terms of Adventure Time, I find myself a lot more compelled by their smaller scale stuff. For me, the higher the stakes, the less fun it is, because I just enjoy the boys goofing around.
Yeah, and of course I do as well. I love the THBs goofing, but it's the difference to me is something like Stargate will have well, no, this doesn't make sense. I don't know. The stakes just feel more. It's been a 4-year build-up at this point since I've been... And I started listening to the show from episode 1.
Maybe that's part of the difference.
It's been this 4-year build-up of this kind of really intricate, at first, plot being kind of very subtly hinted at. And these kind of very mindfucky reveals. Like there's one at the end of the Western Majora's Mask. I forgot what the arc is called, but where you find out that Magnus was a red robe, and it's just like this thing that has been built up for so long, and this kind of twist, and there's all this intricate plot stuff that is finally starting to come together. And as someone who has been listening to this show for like 4 fucking years, or I don't know, maybe more, I can't remember, but it's very satisfying.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Even as that stuff was going on in those earlier arcs, I just wasn't as interested. Like the reveal that Magnus was a red robe to me was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is going to tie into the big plot. But I always found myself very interested in the individual arcs plots, like so things like the wagon racing or the train the train express one, the Murder on the Orient Express ripoff one.
That's still my favorite arc.
Yeah, that's still my favorite, and I think I actually just preferred it when it was simpler and it was just 3 goofballs who for some reason were immune to these artifacts for no reason, which just gone around being idiots. And I'm very and so for instance in the most recent episodes, where they've sort of been looping through these 100 years, my favorite moments have been the ones where it's just been a year that sort of doesn't represent, like, you know, talking to the hunger or anything.
Doesn't represent plot, yeah.
And it's just been some weird, wacky planet that they've had to do something. Like the beach episode was probably my favorite. And so I'm actually quite keen for
it to wrap up
for this finale. Yeah, because I'm hoping that the reboot, at least for a while, will go back to just sort of lower stakes, you know, early level adventure stuff, which is the part that definitely appeals to me more.
Okay. In our show notes here, I wrote down Mabim Bam TV show. Look, Mabim Bam had a TV show since we did the Adventure Zone thing.
Mabim Bam is my brother and my brother and me, which
is my brother, my brother and me. It's the podcast that the people from the Adventure Zone do that kind of spun off into the Adventure Zone. Yeah. Go listen to it if you like it. Go watch the TV show. You'll love the TV show if you like the Mabim Bam podcast, and you'll probably like the podcast if you like the Adventure Zone.
Well, because I actually went and watched a bit of the TV show.
Oh, yeah? And you don't listen to My Brother and Me, do you?
No, I've heard bits, and I do enjoy those bits. I just, for some reason, have never gotten around to sort of starting to listen regularly and subscribe and all that. But I very much enjoyed the show. It was definitely... It helped me sort of... I guess part of the problem I had when I had to sort with the Adventure Zone, as well as the bits I listened to of My Brother and Me, I constantly sort of got confused as to who was who and sort of lost
You've
track
been listening to this podcast for so long, Elliot. How can you still not know their fucking voices?
No, well, that's actually what I want to say. The Mabim Bam TV show, like 20 minutes of that actually cleared up all the confusion I had.
Oh, it cured it for you.
Yeah,
Good.
So I'd recommend that to anybody who's a couple of episodes into the Adventure Zone and still getting confused, because I think the problem with the Adventure Zone is you're getting introduced to the brothers and their characters all at once, and I just ended up getting bamboozled.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well, you didn't actually mention did you like the show? What did you think?
I did. I thought it was really funny. So I watched the episode where they were I can't even remember what they were doing with tarantulas, but it was all
tarantula parade.
Yeah,
so they put up one of their episodes for free on YouTube. So if you just look up My Brother and Me TV show on YouTube, I think you'll probably find it. It's the 4th out of 6 episodes, but they're not like, there's no order to them really, so you can watch them in whatever order you want.
It's very much like the podcast where each episode sort of has a theme, but it's really just random goofs that they're doing.
Yeah.
But no, I actually really enjoyed it and found it really funny. The show. It's just them being idiots.
If you like the podcast, if you like My Brother and Me, which you probably will if you like the Adventure Zone, then you'll like the TV show. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so next up is episode 19, Attack the Block. Do we have anything to say about this one?
No, only that it was good. I liked it.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is probably one of our, out of all the things we've done, I reckon this is probably the biggest like sleeper hit to me. Is the one that I kind of go back to thinking about it and being like, that was a good movie. I really liked that movie.
I was actually surprised when it wasn't the number one. Like, you know, earlier I said Victor Rubio won with the 6 Feet Under recommendation. I was actually thinking Attack the Block was gonna be the winner.
What was this? What scores did we give Attack the Block?
So it got an 8.25 overall. I gave it an 8. You gave it an 8.5.
Well, oh well.
Yeah.
I like it. Maybe I would bump that up to a 9. Maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. I feel like it's hard for it to compete as a movie against a TV show because you don't have as much content to enjoy. When there's a lot of good content, it really just you get into it more.
I think the appeal of Attack the Block is it feels like a people pleaser. Like it's definitely that sort of movie where if everyone's sitting around wondering what to watch, it feels like that movie where you could just open up Netflix and be like, oh, pretty much everyone will enjoy this, and it's kind of rewatchable. So even if 1 or 2 people have seen it,
you'll still enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard our Attack the Block episode, go back and listen to it. We talk about all this stuff. It's a good movie. You'd like it.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, listener, you would like it. So episode 20.
Far into our. So if you made it this far into our stuff, you'll definitely like Attack the Block.
Well, yeah, that's true. So episode 20 is the double feature of iZombie and the 100.
Yeah.
So let's just get this out of the way. I have not watched any more of iZombie, but I have watched more of the 100.
That is a shock to me.
What? Yeah. Well, whatever. I don't know. It was. I'm still kind of bitter about iZombie because I feel like I wanted to like it a lot more than I did.
It's actually interesting. Season 3 of iZombie just finished about a week or 2 ago. And my biggest complaint was that most of season 3 was actually dealing with the overarching plot, and it drifted away from having just like a weird brain and case of
You're tempting me back in.
I know. I was watching it and not enjoying it as much and thinking, God damn it, this is exactly what Reuben wanted.
Maybe they listen to me.
So I think they're setting up season 4 to be their final. But I mean, I'd sort of just stand by probably what I think I said in the episode, which is just if you're a Veronica Mars fan, it's definitely the way to go. And it's not too serious. But yeah.
All right. The 100. I've been watching some more of it. I'm partway through season 2, and I'm dreading. I was looking at the IMDb graph for the 100, and is it season 3 that's just like really shit?
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing when my sister was the one who got me to watch the 100, and I looked at the same scores just as I was in season 2 and was thinking, oh, what is coming? And I think the scores are a little unfair. It's definitely a drop and the worst part of the show, but it's not like a 2 out of 10 like the IMDb ratings would suggest.
So I'm looking at the episode links here, the episode ratings on IMDb. So the finale of season 2 is like a 9.3 on IMDb. And then season 3 starts with like an 8.2, and it goes along for 5 or 6 episodes. 8.6, there's a 9, and then episode 6 is an 8.4, and episode 7 is a 5.7, and it's just like this very slow climb up after that point in the episode.
And so I mean, I will say there are some plot and character things that go on there that are kind of terrible, and it does sort of have to climb its way back out. But the scores are exacerbated by as we sort of talked about, this is a CW show, and there was a relationship that was happening in the show that had become quite popular with a section of the fan base, and when one of those characters, exactly, and so when one of those characters got killed off halfway through season 3, there was a backlash in that aspect. The backlash was because people didn't want that character to die because they wanted the relationship to get going.
So you think that drop was just based on that kind of subgroup of the...
Yeah, the drop is because of the fans of the relationship, not because of the regular people who like the show for all the characters.
Who probably don't go on IMDb and obsessively rate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair. Well, maybe we'll follow up in another year and see if I've done that. So our next few episodes, again, I don't think we have that much to talk about, was episode 21, Telltale's The Walking Dead, episode 22, 6 Feet Under, episode 23, Hawkeye, and I've mentioned here, I gave you some other comics to read. I don't think you've gotten to them yet, is that right?
No, I have not. I still plan to, but as we sort of talked about in the Hawkeye episode, my thirst for comics is
super high.
Not that dire.
We've got episode 24, which was Guards, and I haven't read any more Terry Pratchett books since then, but I do want to. But anyway, and episode 25 is The Watered Man. Do we have anything to say about that one? Have you continued the Desert Spear a bit?
Yeah, I have, and so that's sort of what's kept me back in for Legendary Kingdoms is I've sort of gotten swept up in the Demon Cycle series. So I'm about at the end of the Desert Spear, and I like I like where the series has gone. Like you sort of talked about, it's moved on from its original premise a lot, and it has sort of become a bit more, I guess I'd say, Game of Thronesy. In that it's become a lot more about this political human conflict with the magical stuff getting dragged out a bit.
Kind of backdrop.
Yeah, but I've liked it. Like I'm still keen to keep going.
I mean, the kind of trend of this annual checkup has been there's a bunch of stuff that we do want to keep going with, but we just haven't done that, right? Like,
yeah,
to some extent, you can be good media and not be good enough to want to constantly be like following along with this thing, right?
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, I guess with that in mind, like should we talk about the things that we think were the best? Like, I mean, we've sort of run through everything a bit slowly, but for instance, like Sense8 and Worm are definitely the two that I jumped on as soon as there was more.
Yeah, definitely, me too. And God, I would jump on a Coherence too so quickly. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm also if you've okay, this is a weird thing to say, but if you've listened to this whole episode and you haven't listened to any of our other episodes, what the fuck are you doing? First of all, you should go check out some other stuff. But if we have to pick like our highlights from this year, right? What would they be? I would say Sense8, Young Justice, Worm, maybe Adventure Zone, and what was the other one? Oh, Attack the Block.
Yeah.
I would say those are my highlights from the year.
In terms of, ones that are sort of have more things coming, and we're definitely keen to see where they go. Or maybe not so much Attack the Block, because I like definitely some of the smaller ones for me like stood out, like Reservoir Dogs and that sort of thing.
Well, let's say, are we going to do like what's our winner? If we had to have one piece of media from this year that we think is the piece of media to recommend, what would it be? Would it be Worm?
Yeah, for me, it's hands down Worm.
Okay.
I mean, I still stick by, in terms of when I'm getting people into TV shows, Stargate's still my go-to.
Yep.
But
yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's say Worm. Yep. So, if you've joined us kind of late in the year, or if you haven't been listening for the past 6 months, only the past 5 months,
or the past hour of this episode.
Yep. Yeah, then go back to our episode number 13, Worm, and check it out, because it's good, and there's a sequel starting to come out hopefully soon. Wildberg, give it to us. Come on, man.
Yeah, nobody cares about your stupid twig. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
that. Before we wrap this up, let's just kind of quickly retouch on the major points. We're going to be kind of adjusting the format of the show a bit. We're going to be doing a 3-week cycle where you actually can follow along with the content and talk to us about it and engage with us, and we'll be kind of engaging with the community a bit in our part 2 episodes. So if you want to kind of do that, you can check out our website, which is mediamdpodcast.com, or you can go to reddit.com/r/mediamd. And that's kind of the main places where we'll be doing discussion. All the links to all our stuff is on our website, so you can go there first, I guess.
Yeah, and we're trying to become a lot more community oriented. So participating in these discussions, we're gonna try and bring comments and stuff in. So maybe your comment will be read on this very podcast.
So we're gonna start off our first part of this new format next week. We're gonna be looking at a TV show called The Expanse, which I haven't seen. Elliot, you've seen.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you've seen The Expanse and you want to kind of chuck in some comments, some spoiler-free comments about it, we'll have a Reddit thread up for you to do that by the time this podcast goes live. So check out our website again, mediamdpodcast.com, or the subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/mediamd.
That's right.
And we'll see you in a week.
I'll be trawling through that sort of comment section and pulling out bits to sort of bring up to help explain to Reuben what makes The Expanse so great. So
All right, cool. Well, that's us then. We'll see you in a week, guys.
See ya.
Bye.